Lager. God, I can't think. I need more Mullins.
Hello, and welcome back to The Office Field Guide. I'm Chris from Mulverine Films, and we're reviewing every episode of The Office ever. Today we are looking at The Dinner Party. The Dinner Party is either the 13th episode, if you're watching on the DVDs, or the 9th episode, if you're watching on Netflix, of the 4th season of The Office, and 66th episode overall. It was written by Lee Eisenberg and Gene Stupinski, and directed by Julian Farino. It was viewed by 9.2 million people back in April of 2008 after a 4-month hiatus after the deposition. As always, this is just a review of the plot, some of the funny bits and easy to miss stuff, as well as some of my thoughts on the deeper meaning of this episode. There's so much to talk about, I'm sort of overwhelmed. And let me tell you, I used to hate this episode. I'm not talking about back in 2008, I used to hate this episode. I used to skip this episode until sometime last year. I was watching The Office one time with my wife and this episode came up. I asked if we could skip it. She asked me why I wanted to skip it, and I said it kind of stresses me out. I will say I watched the Dinner Party episode with her that night, and I think it changed my opinion of this episode. Since then, I've watched the DVD extras, the bloopers, read interviews about this episode, and scoured every frame in preparation for this field guide. And I'm here to tell you that this is now one of my favorite episodes. I just hope I can do justice to it during this field guide. So without further ado, let's get this party started.
Yeah, just explain what that is.
Explain what you think that is.
Okay.
Just explain.
We've got a lot to talk about and not a lot of time. The setup for this episode is really simple. Michael socially traps Jim and Pam into attending a dinner party with Michael and Jan at Michael's condo. Angela and Andy are invited to go. Dwight and his babysitter are not invited and still join. Awkwardness ensues.
No one asked you anything ever?
All right, and so where do we even start with this episode? I guess first, how is this episode only 22 minutes long? In my mind, when I think about this episode, I've inflated this to an hour long. But when you watch it, there is literally so much happening so fast, both things that are being said and things that are in the background, that it is super overwhelming. Since this is a rare occurrence of only one plot line occurring in an episode, I figured that the best way to deconstruct it is to break it down by the individual sequences. In each sequence, I'll give some of my thoughts on the character interactions, the digs, its set design. Some things are obvious and some things are not so much. So get yourself settled in. This is going to be fun. All right, so we start this cold opening with Michael construing a situation in which he essentially catches Jim off guard enough that Jim has no excuse for why he can't attend the dinner party. This is great for so many reasons. Michael forces the entire office to cancel their Friday night plans in an attempt to get one couple to come to his house. Why wouldn't he have just made some plan to have just the sales staff and Pam stay rather than the whole office? Secondly, when Michael confirms that Jim doesn't have plans, he tells off corporate. This clip is the best.
Well, we don't want to work. No, we don't. It's not fair to these people. These people are my friends and I care about them!
The third thing is that Michael proudly grabs his best boss mug and walks out to tell everyone about his victory. The fourth thing that's hilarious is Michael says the words,
That's what you said?
Is that a play on That's What She Said? And the fifth thing is that when Jim says Michael's been trying to get them over for a dinner party several times, he wasn't lying.
Michael has asked Pam and me to dinner at least 9 times.
You guys should come over for dinner. You and Pam? That'd be fun.
That would be
Friday?
fun.
Want to come over Friday?
Stinks.
Darn it.
Shoot.
How about this weekend? How about you, Pam, me, Casa, little dinner, dancing, drinks? You said you didn't have plans.
And every time, we've been able to get out of it.
Can't.
After work, you guys...
Oh no. No, can't.
We only had tonight free, and we really wanted to spend it with you.
To hell. Okay.
Hi!
Hello!
And so we begin. I call this scene the greeting. But to start with, the character interactions are great. These hugs are so awkward. Jim goes to give Michael a handshake, Jan hugs him first, and then Michael goes in for this awkward group hug. Jan may or may not have just been checking Jim out while Michael's hugging Pam. Michael gives this awkward hug exchange with Pam while Jan's watching. Jan's jealousy of Pam is continued here right off the bat. Jan's blouse is kind of low cut.
No. Make yourself to
And
home.
stop.
This is our
Jim and Pam communicate so well during this episode just by looking at each other. As we talked about in another field guide, this nonverbal communication is earned through years of these two being in complete sync with each other. Let's put a counter up for each time that they look at each other, and instead of dinging it each time, I'll have to add a total at the end of each segment. Otherwise, this video would be 392 minutes long. Oh, and we have a Michaelism here.
Make yourself to home. This is our casa.
Really nice.
Tour. Let's do the tour first.
Okay.
All right, and here's counter number 2. Let the babe counter start rolling.
You have a preference, babe? Upstairs first?
Totally your call, babe.
All right, well, let's go then. So sorry about this god-awful carpet. We are still a work in progress here.
Well, that's...
Okay, and this brings us into the digs. People are digging at each other constantly in this episode, especially Jan and Michael. So let's hit up another counter. And so for obvious ones, I won't comment on them, but for others, I just may have to. Okay, so for set design, I'd like to get some of these things out of the way now. There are 4 motifs in Jan's design work in this condo. First, candles, 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 candles everywhere. Let's get another counter going. 2, there are urns or vases, vases, whatever you want to call them, all over the place. There's no need for a counter here, but I'm sure it has significance. They're more than likely empty, which might be a reflection on where Jan is right now or where Jan and Michael's relationship really is. 3, Jan has art all over the place, and there are 3 motifs specifically in her art. Yes, this is a nested list. The first motif that we see in her art is red. Red is a stressful color. It symbolizes stress, anger, rage, etc., bad emotions, and I think this shows Jan's current state of mind. Secondly, Jan is all over her own art. Her art features herself. It's been pointed out on the internet, there isn't a single picture of Jan and Michael together in the condo. There's not even a picture of Michael in the condo. I believe this is intentional to show that Jan is pretty vain, and also that Michael is just a mean to an end for her. And the third motif in her art is emptiness. Most of the rest of the art around the house is abstract, meaning there's kind of this bland color swatches thing going on. Or they're photography of places that are empty, like a bench with nobody sitting in it. Now this may be a stretch, but I also think this signifies how empty Jan is. And lastly, the fourth motif in Jan's design is lamps. There is lighting everywhere. Beyond candles and the fireplace, there are lamps everywhere. Light fixtures, lamps, sconces, lawn lighting, so hit that counter. I'm not exactly sure what to make of this, other than it symbolizes that this episode is going to shine light on Michael and Jan's home life. Whew. Guys, that was just one scene. Okay, we can do this. We've got our format down. Let's start flying through this.
This is my office.
Yep.
I'm gonna call this segment The Tour.
Is my office.
Yep. Never been used.
Not super exciting.
Pam is able to hold it pretty together in the candle factory more than Jim can. I love Jim's face when he can't handle the smells. Serenity by Jan is such a great name for her business. This is the least serene episode.
Place that I conduct business. I'm sure that you're the same with your doodles.
It's gutsy for Pam to call Jan out for having an office and a workspace. I wonder what she was thinking. Jan has a candle scent of bonfire. That's typically not something people want to smell inside their house. And she also makes a comment about how guys love that scent. Michael starts doing his James Bond impersonation out of the blue. Oh wait, is that a Michaelism? Michael thinks that bonfire is actually bond fire. When Michael's doing his James Bond impersonation, Jan has to smell the candle, which I remind you smells like bonfire. Jan's eyes are seriously crazy when she says,
Or angry, I come up here and I just smell all my candles. And it just poof, goes away.
and Jim and Pam genuinely look terrified at this moment. On to the bedroom. By the way, do people show people bedrooms during tours of their house? I don't think we've ever shown anybody our bedroom. Pam knows the backstory of the camera. I wonder if she ever told Jim about that.
Babe,
Exactly.
I thought you said that you were going to tighten things up.
Well,
A great that's what she said missed moment.
Seems pretty narrow and short.
it's actually a lot bigger than it seems. Look at this.
When Michael curls up on the bench, it doesn't look comfortable at all. Lastly, the silence while Michael's laying on the bench is such a good way to end this scene. It's so awkward and it's just strange. Okay, I lied. I'm actually going to call out some set design stuff here too. There's plastic still in the office chair, which backs up Michael's claim that Jan has never actually used this office. There are 14 pillows on Michael and Jan's bed. No wonder there's no space for him. There's another picture of Jan on the table by the Foreman grill. Oh, the Foreman grill is sitting there. Jan actually let him get away with that one. And what the heck is this blue thing on the table? Guys, the opening credits just stopped reeling. But onward, let's do this thing.
I finally broke down and bought myself a plasma TV.
We're calling this one the living room tour. Michael is so proud of his TV. Just wait till the end of this one when we have this blooper. It was so hard for them to get through this scene. Picture Michael standing in front of his TV for hours is just hilarious.
I will just stand here and watch television for hours. I love it.
Jim and Pam are doing their absolute best to just play along with this night of craziness. Jan clearly cannot stand Michael. The conversation about the type of wood reminds me so much of dumb things that I've talked about when desperately reaching for anything to fill a void in a conversation. And Jan so affirmatively says that it's pine. Is she like a wood expert? I love how Pam bounces off Jim's dig at himself with something that's completely unrelated. Setting a TiVo couldn't be more different from building a table. Again, I think she's just reaching for anything to fill the void of awkwardness. Jim points out the Dundies to take attention off the awkwardness. At some point, these two are going to learn that everywhere they turn is going to be conflict.
Audio for a week.
If you ever need any help, I am just a phone call away.
I bet you are. Well, it was between the neon beer sign and the Dundies, so I said, honey, keep the trophy.
Do honeys count as babes? I'm counting them.
Oh, honey, I have the best trophy right here.
Oh.
And now that Michael mentions it, Jan is a trophy to him. He doesn't value their relationship. He values what their relationship means to his status. And she just eats this up. And I'm pretty sure it's offensive to be called a trophy spouse. And as far as set design goes, I know I've already called out these other things. The TV is great. You couldn't ask for a better placement. The wires, the little TV, the tiny wall mount that only comes out a couple inches. This was one of the hardest scenes for them to get through, and I love it. We are only 6 minutes into this episode.
Just a second.
All right, Saved by the Bell. We're calling this one Greeting Number 2. All right.
So glad.
No.
Okay.
Michael gives this look to the camera when he's been rejected. Andy's kind of rocking this social interaction with his obliviousness. Then he goes downhill by saying tuna 6 times.
Tuna! What's up, tuna? Tuna, right? Tuna every night.
Also, implying that Pam has tuna every night is probably an inappropriate thing to say, ? And then Andy goes back to being socially good by bringing flowers and then giving a flower to Angela.
My flower.
Oh.
What am I supposed to do with this?
We have to take a second here to spot out what Andy's actually wearing. Andy's wearing a heavy coat, a sweater around his shoulders, a flannel, and a turtleneck under that. That seems like a lot.
3 hours from now or 3 hours from earlier, like 4 o'clock?
You know, Pam, in Spain, they often don't even start eating until midnight.
I'm counting that one as a dig because Jan is implying that Pam is not cultured. Oh, and a great Michaelism right here.
In Spain, they often don't even start eating until midnight.
When in Rome.
You have a preference? Upstairs first?
Whatever you say, babe.
Follow me?
All right.
And we don't see it, but we have to imagine that they repeat the entire tour for Angela and Andy instead of starting dinner. And as far as the set design goes, there's a strange shadow on the wall, which is a shadow from a lamp that's being illuminated by a different lamp. Maybe it's just signifying that we're beginning to see what the light is revealing. And this is the living room scene. All right, Angela doesn't drink. Her cup is on the end table. Pam's not drinking either. Angela has a pillow between her and Pam, presumably because she doesn't want to touch Pam. Jan creepily whispers cheers 3 times.
Here's to good friends.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Here's another Michaelism.
That is sort of an oaky afterbirth.
Do you guys remember my old assistant Hunter? He is an excellent songwriter. Wait till you hear this.
That one night you made
I could do an entire video on Hunter's song, and I've got so many ideas reeling in my head right now about how I would do that. We can all agree that this song is about Hunter and Jan hooking up, which makes this dance all the more awkward. And then here's Andy doing Andy things. Jan's dancing is incredible. All the looks she's given Jim this episode, she clearly has a thing for him. And Michael seems to be aware of how awkward this is, which is juxtaposed to his normal kind of oblivious look that he has during most of this episode until the end.
Hunter was a terrible assistant.
Well, I think he's probably just about as reliable as Pam, being that it usually takes you an afternoon to get back to me.
Sometimes I think she holds on to faxes.
Okay, and are they doing talking heads in the bathroom? What excuse could they have possibly made to get the camera and or the cameraman to come into the bathroom together? And as far as set design, we do notice that there are now hors d'oeuvres served on the table, which no one is eating.
Ow!
No, it's a hump. There's a hump.
All right, on to plain charades. Is there any more of a dinner party game than charades? I'm pretty sure I remember an episode of Bewitched when they're playing charades at a dinner party. Andy doesn't know anything about sports. That's why he didn't say 49ers quarterback. Jim is checking his watch here, clearly wants to leave. Michael's being really loud and obnoxious here, but harmlessly so. And Jim is conveniently blocked from view, but it's pretty clear that neither Jan nor Michael were really looking at Jim's reaction either way.
Babe, can you just really, we're just really...
What?
Could you just simmer down,
No,
seriously?
I'm just making people laugh.
No.
Yes.
Seem to be playing their own separate game, and it's called Let's See How Uncomfortable We Can Make Our Guests.
I love what Jim said there about Michael and Jan having a game, but Jim and Pam are also playing a game in this episode. It's kind of like, how can we get through this night and have the most fun? And they're kind of on a roller coaster here, but for the most part, they seem to actually be having fun.
True. That is a great point. Come on down here.
All right, and I'll address this too. I've heard people think that it was wrong for Jim to try to leave and that Pam was wrong in being vindictive for keeping Jim at the party. But I think this falls in line with what we were just talking about, that this was written to show that they're being playful. And that's really how they are. This is a game to them now, hence why I think Jim starts loosening up during charades.
It's Tom.
No
and he
names,
goes on
no names, no rhyming,
All right.
no sound alike.
Okay, you're getting into my head.
Jan is all about the rules, taking winning too seriously. Guys, being overly competitive at a dinner party is just super awkward. Don't do it. And one of my highlights for this episode is Jim purposefully giving the wrong answers.
Caribbean cruise.
I don't know.
Katie Holmes.
No. But he's married to her.
Oh, Dawson's Creek.
No, it has to be a real person, Jim. Come on.
The only thing I saw in the set design here is there's no real way to know how much time has already passed during this dinner party, but there are now 3 bottles of wine on the table and an empty bowl. And this is the Great Chill Out. Hard cut to everyone sitting quiet. This is so effective at showing how long and how off the rails this dinner party has gotten. You know that point in a party after you've ate, been social, and you're just chilling, and someone says, "Hey, I should probably get going." And then that sparks a mass exodus of multiple people from the party. Yet they can't do that yet because dinner hasn't been served. So instead, they just sit and wait. And to add on top of that, there's slow jazz on the stereo that makes this slightly more painful. Okay, and Jan looks crazy right now.
It's actually a really cute story. Do you want to tell it, babe, or should I tell it?
I don't like that story, babe.
Come on, it's a cute...
Can we just take a moment and imagine Michael Scott, who's so excited about the prospect of ice cream, runs through a glass sliding door just to get to this ice cream? Imagination is great.
Ran through the sliding glass door because he thought he heard the ice cream truck.
Stop! Okay, sue me. Oh, no, don't.
When the digs start, Jan starts wafting the candle to calm herself down.
Was extremely clean and it looked invisible.
Before I lived here, the glass was always covered in smudges.
You are! She is the devil!
And oh my gosh, so much just happened. Jan calls herself the devil. Michael agrees and says he's in hell. The directing here is incredible. Jan's makeup, her dress, her lipstick, the fire behind her, the conversation about being the devil and in hell, the camera work, and Melora's acting here all coincides to give a truly incredible shot conveying how frantic and insane this relationship really is. And also, maybe Jan's the devil? And let's look at the reactions of everybody in this scene. Andy's oblivious. Angela says you shouldn't joke about hell and the devil. Jim's giving the Jim face to the camera. And Pam tries to escape.
What kind of hostess would I be? I didn't. Right. No. In fact, you know what? Girls' trip. Angela, come on. Girls' trip. Not even close.
So,
And this is in the kitchen. I feel Pam's pain. I've been to dinner parties before in which the host took forever to have dinner ready, and it's the worst, especially for someone who struggles with becoming a hangry beast. Like me. Jan thinks that Pam and Michael have dated.
You should see our bathroom after Michael takes a bath. Whew. But I don't have to tell you, Pam.
yeah. I've noticed how you look at him at the office.
Okay, this is kind of a callback to that time Michael tried to kiss Pam, and maybe a callback to earlier in this season when Pam saw Michael naked, but we'd have to use our imagination to picture what Michael has actually told Jan about their relationship in the past. Also, she thinks that Pam is looking at Michael throughout this entire episode, instead of vice versa, which might be the case. And even Angela chimes in again, only to criticize Pam. Pam strongly denies these allegations. Jan's drinking a really large glass of wine. Okay, and we see red becoming more prevalent as this episode goes on. We see a red teapot, red ceramic pot, red jars on the counter, red bowls on the island, red fabric on the chair. Also, what's with the apples? That's a lot of apples on the table.
Spend most of my time right here. Have a hand.
I'm gonna call this segment In the Garage. And after all of this, Michael still tries to pitch the $10,000 investment into Serenity by Jan. And do you think Andy actually has $10,000 to invest here?
What do you think about that?
Thought about it. I'm in.
Or is he just talking about his parents' money? Or is Andy just so desperate to please people that he just says yes without thinking? And I've read that the writers love the idea that Michael would be the kind of guy that's taken by late night infomercials, which should explain why he has so much crap in his garage. And there's so many things to call out here as far as set design goes. The Porsche's in the garage. I had previously assumed that they had sold that off after the Money episode, and they got the more sensibly priced PT Cruiser, but clearly not. And I've watched this episode so many times now, I think I just noticed that Michael has a little office space set up in the garage. Also, most of the stuff in the boxes are Michael's stuff, which means that Jan pretty much boxed up Michael's stuff in Michael's condo and put it out in the garage. And the Bowflex still has plastic on it, which is juxtaposed to the plastic on Jan's unused office chair. What the heck is this thing behind Jim? And we see the return of the St. Pauli girl. And for the first scene in this entire episode, we don't have a dig.
We came here to eat dinner and to party. This is a dinner party, right?
Awesome.
And this is greeting number 3. Enter Dwight and his babysitter. Pam is really excited that another element has gotten injected to really flesh out how crazy this night is going. Dwight's wine glasses are huge. We'll see that again in a second. This cooler looks like it's from 1980 or before. Dwight's hair is done differently than normal. It's actually kind of combed.
What is he doing here?
Yes, what are you doing here?
Dwight is my friend. You said that I could not invite Dwight because he was not part of a couple.
Michael's turn here is so quick that I can't tell if Michael secretly invited him or not, or just used this to take a stance with Jan. What was that noise that Dwight just made at his date in response to her question?
We weren't invited?
You said...
And here's your Michaelism for this scene.
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap! I did! You have no idea the physical toll that 3 vasectomies have on a person!
Michael says he bought this condo to fill with kids. I love that line. Also, Jan says she doesn't want to bring kids into this screwed up world, but we find out later that Jan was going to the clinic during their relationship. So the question here is Jan pregnant during this episode? If so, does she know it? And Michael is so eager to have a family that all he hears from Jan's statement is,
Fine, you win! Let's have a kid!
he's ready to roll in this relationship for as long as that takes to play out. And this is such a sad line.
So, can we come in?
And this is Around the Table. Things are really going to start heating up here. Dwight and his date eat turkey legs that they brought from home. Also, they're eating those turkey legs before everyone's even had a chance to be served.
I hope she didn't do anything to the food.
Hey, looks great, babe.
Yeah, it really does.
With as crazy as Jan's been acting tonight, I'm not sure it's that weird for Pam to not eat her food. Oh, Pam doesn't eat her food. Angela puts a napkin over her food, as she's a vegetarian.
Can you not do that? It's disgusting. Oops. Hey, babe.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it up. I think it ties the whole room together. Dan thinks Hunter's very talented.
At least he's an artist. Y'all hear me bragging about it?
To try to work on my rich friends.
Should we comment here that Michael thinks that his employees are rich? Maybe except for Andy, why would he think that?
I would love to burn your candles.
You burn it, you buy it.
I'll be your first customer.
You're hardly my first.
That's what she said. Good luck paying me back on your $0 a year salary plus benefits.
I'm gonna get going.
Fine, get out of here.
I love that the babysitter is the one to speak up first.
You want to press charges?
Would she get into trouble?
Yeah, she'd be charged.
This might be my favorite joke of the entire episode. We see even here,
I will take the fall.
Michael is still willing to fall on his sword for Jan.
I did it.
You know, you don't have to press charges. You can just try to be more quiet.
I love that Jim can't remember what disaster has befallen on him.
Jim, Pam,
Oh, my apartment's on fire. Flooded.
And as this episode wraps up, we get to see Jim and Pam's relationship juxtaposed to Michael and Jan's. With them calling each other babe, eating, and listening to Hunter's song, there's a completely different feel when Jim and Pam are doing these things compared to when Michael and Jan are doing those things. Then we get a great musical montage where we're listening to Hunter's song, and we get to see all these storylines start wrapping up. And is it me, or did Dwight drive Michael around until he fell asleep like Michael's a baby?
That one night, you made everything.
why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
Guys, I am super tired after that, but let's do this thing. Let's unpack this one. This is actually a pretty straightforward episode. I think it's simply Michael and Jan need to break up, and everything is pointing to this. Take into account the colors and the lighting. Michael is blue and is associated with cool things in this episode. Not cool like he's awesome, cool like cold. And Jan, on the other hand, is red and associated with hot things. Not hot like sexy, hot like temperature hot. So look at all these things. Michael's jacket is blue. His shirt is blue. His pillow is blue. His table is a very, very soft white oak or pine. His chairs are very soft colors. The garage is a cold place, and he's got his mini fridge in it. And the St. Pauli sign is probably the most obvious one, but we'll get to that in a moment. When we look at Jan, we see the Andy Warhol type painting of herself. Those are red and very, very hot colors. This indicates a lot of stress or a lot of anger. And the 4 different aspects reflects that there is multiple Jans all over the place. You might see Jan act like this at one point, and you might see Jan act like that at one point. I can't believe that they actually made this painting for this episode. And we do get to see this painting again later in the series. The candles are signifying heat and light. There's lights everywhere. Her shirt is a very deep and bright red. Her lipstick, all the cooking stuff, the fire that she's sitting in front of, the bonfire scented candle, even the oven. And when we look at the painting over the table, we get to see this chaotic, abstract mess of a painting, which indicates a lot of stress and maybe even anxiety. And that's the thing about art, right? You look at it and it's supposed to make you feel something. Jan decorates her house with things that reflect her. And so when Michael pulls down her painting and puts up his St. Pauli sign, it's more than just a defiant act in front of his friends. But we'll get to that in just a second. The tension between these two has been building up for quite a while now. And I don't mean just during this episode. During the money episode, we see Michael scrambling because of how dysfunctional their relationship is. Then in the deposition, the last episode, we see Michael choose Dunder Mifflin over her. But even through that, he's still not ready to get out of this codependent relationship. The difficulty in their relationship becomes even more clear when we get to see the tour of their home. And this is really a tour of their relationship. So much is revealed about how they function just by looking at how they live. And the devil's in the details here, which is why I took the time to call out all of the different motifs that are used during this episode. We get to see these glimpses of dysfunction around Michael Scott's condo. And what was the straw that broke the camel's back? I would suggest it wasn't just the TV, it was throwing the Dundee itself. And the significance of Michael removing Jan's red painting from the wall and hanging up his bright blue sign is stating, look, I'm ready to reclaim my life. I'm ready to finally depose you and your power over me. And we know that Michael desperately wants to be a family man, but I think he's finally realized that Jan is not the means to that end. And I found 3 metaphors for Michael and Jan's relationship in this episode. First, their sleeping arrangement. Jan has a bed full of pillows, and we've already seen that she takes up the whole bed when she sleeps.
That's what I have to come home to.
And Michael is forced to sleep on the little bench. Michael has allowed Jan to come into his life and completely take over. All of his stuff, all of his money, all of his personality, well, maybe some of his personality, and gives him just enough to keep him going. And Michael is going with the flow because he's desperate. Secondly, Michael's table is a metaphor for their relationship, as we see he's doing everything he can to keep them together, sacrificing quality and aesthetics for the pride of what he has. He's so eager to show off his table and to talk about how he built it, in the same way he's so eager to have his trophy wife and be a family man. So much so that he's willing to forego every warning sign that Jan has put in front of him. And lastly, we see a final look at Jan trying to fix the Dundee, and that's a metaphor for their relationship. It's broken, and no amount of glue and effort is going to put that back together. Put this all together, and I think we can glean an insight from this episode that trying to force a dysfunctional relationship to work for our own good without effort from both parties to make it functional is ultimately going to end in chaos. Or I don't know, maybe this episode was only here just to have a ton of Easter eggs and a ton of fun.
What gives you the right?
All right, so let's get to some ratings. The cold opening, it's really funny. I give it a 4 out of 5. Michael's phone call yelling at corporate is just great. It's missing something, and I'm not sure what, so that's why I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. The episode itself, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. I can't say this enough. This might be the greatest episode of television ever produced. Everything works in unison together. The set design has so many Easter eggs in it, as well as an enormous amount of symbolism. And the writing is amazing. The funny stuff in this episode is just unparalleled. So in this episode, I counted 27 candles, 6 empty pictures, 11 babes or honeys, 25 lamp or light fixtures, 11 Dundies, 14 Jim and Pam looks. Again, I'm sorry I didn't add each one because this video would have taken so much longer to make and watch. 52 digs at each other, and 3 metaphors about their relationship. And I'd like to remind you that this episode is only 22 minutes long. So I think that this more than earns a 5 out of 5.
Then I gotta get him to the Dundies.
The Dundee to replace the broken Dundee goes to Michael Scott.
I have the best trophy right here, aside from my Dundies. Oh.
And the Dundee for the worst move ever to make your ex-girlfriend jealous goes to Dwight Schrute.
I was his babysitter.
And now you guys are dating?
Purely carnal, that's all you need to know.
Okay, and guys, that's all for the dinner party. It's been a fun journey. This has been so much fun to make. I loved analyzing this episode, going frame by frame, counting all this stuff. This was great. I love this episode. Again, I hope you love this stuff as much as I do. Please like and subscribe, and we'll keep going at this. If you hit the notification bell, you'll get notified for next week's episode, which is going to be a field guide on the episode, The Chair Model. Not as good as this episode, but really, I mean, what could be? But stay tuned. I've got some good stuff planned for that too. So leave a comment, tell me what maybe your most awkward dinner party story is. Or better yet, tell me what your favorite excuse for exiting a dinner party is. I hope you're enjoying the field guides. See you next time.
And 1 flower.
Can we start from the beginning? That is the best flower ever.
I might just stay here a while, say I got lost. I might stay here a while, say I got lost.
Are you eating? Oh my god!
I don't want to eat it.
I might just stay here a while, say I got lost. I might just stay here a while, say I got lost.
Are you eating?
I didn't have anything. I was doing fine before.
What are you doing here?
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I'm not in character yet.
I guess what surround sound means is that, right over here, Jim. 2 speakers. We have 2 speakers. What? Honey? Oh, Jesus. This is terrible. We'll never finish this episode. Check this out. Folds.